Maddie Glab alongside of CBS Sports NFL analyst Chris Trapasso, who is filling in today. And Chris, in hour number 2, we are going to bring somebody on the show who just did a really cool interview with Josh Allen. We're going to dig into all of that and some more. So let's bring on USA Today NFL writer and editor Doug Farrar, who is joining us right now. Doug, thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Oh, thanks so much. I always appreciate you guys having me.
Doug, you just wrote a piece about Josh Allen, a lengthy piece that covers the past season, this upcoming season, Joe Brady, and some of the new pieces within this offense. I have to ask you first, what was your biggest takeaway from getting to talk to Josh?
Yeah, we spent about 10 minutes on Zoom a few days ago. I think the having talked to him a few times before, just how much he's sort of taken command of the team. He seemed, with all the changes on defense, and certainly with his receiver core, I think Khalil Shakir is the only guy left on the roster as a
Yeah.
receiver who caught a pass from Josh last year. That's a lot. He just seems really kind of in command of the thing, and coming into his 7th year, he's ready to take ownership. He's tremendously excited. Not that he didn't have ownership before, but you know what I mean. He's really excited about working with Joe Brady, which manifested itself on the field to a point in 2023. But as you guys certainly know, no coach can come in halfway through the season going from, to OC and put his whole off in. So, Josh telling me he's got all these new concepts. It makes me want to, work on my footwork and my eyes and, my arm angle and everything. He's just really excited about the way this is going to go. So, he seemed very, very up, very happy about the way things are going to go in the season. And very much, he's really taken ownership of the whole thing. Again, not that he didn't before, but he seems like a bit of a different guy in that regard.
My biggest takeaway, Doug, was I think a huge quote from Josh Allen saying that his previous offense was a little bit mundane. Do you think that's spot
Yeah.
on? And kind of how do you view going from the Ken Dorsey offense first half of 2023 into what will, and you mentioned in your article, the first full year of the true Joe Brady offense in 2024?
Right. What he said was it's not the same mundane things we've been doing for the last 6 years, which would bring Brian Dable into it too. It's different stuff. My eyes have got to be better. My footwork it has to be better, and ultimately the ball placement has got to be better. So it's forcing me to be a better quarterback and to learn different things, which I'm all about. Well, when you go back to when he was selected in 2018, and I think the biggest Josh Allen stan would admit this, when he came out, he was kind of a developmental guy. It wasn't all there yet, which everybody knows. It's not slamming Josh. He's come a long way, and good for him. But Dable gave him man beaters and let him use his legs. And when teams switched to zone, he went to more quick games. So Dable brought him along. We'll always wonder, a couple more years of Dable, what it might have been. I think with Dorsey, and I kind of mentioned this at the time when Dorsey was let go, um, that it wasn't a bad passing game, but and certainly this came to light when I got to see what Brady was doing as the season went along. There maybe with Dorsey wasn't a sense of the routes weren't layered and nuanced together in the way that Brady had done it through the end of the season. There were more four strongs, there were more crossers, there were more mirrored routes with Brady. And I think that gave Josh more of a sense of, okay, I can see the whole thing in front of me. They actually used less motion. They used less 12 personnel, which had a lot to do with Dawson Knox having the wrist injury and the illness. I think they'll use more 12 with those two guys in the season. But I think with Brady, you just saw more of a complete, more of a modern passing game. And again, that's with him only coming in halfway through the season, installing what he could with limited practice time. So when Josh says that now Brady's installing all these new concepts, I'm really excited to see what that looks like.
I want to cover the quarterback going into his 7th NFL season a little bit more and look at it from a big picture of an NFL perspective. By the time you get into your 7th season, regardless if you're the Bills quarterback or the Dolphins quarterback or the Packers quarterback, you know how the game is played. You have a good feel for everything. You have a good feel for understanding defenses. And probably by that time, you've been in 1 to 2 offenses at least if you have had
Sure.
multiple offensive coordinators. But does year 7 and beyond, if you're stuck with the same OC, does it get mundane for most quarterbacks because you already understand the game. You already have a feel for the game. So could it be a good thing that he's getting a new OC in his 7th season to push him to learn new things about how the game is played?
I think that can be the case. I think it was Mike Holmgren who said after about year 10, no matter how good a coach is, the message starts to get a little stale. So maybe that's what Josh was talking about to a point. I know that I asked him for his 3 favorite plays, and one of the plays was the touchdown pass to Dalton Kincaid against the Steelers in the wild card round, where they ran mirrored crossers to either side, and Kincaid was right up they were in empty, and Kincaid just ran a vertical route with Miles Jack, the linebacker, trying to cover him. And they had done a lot of tape work with on the Steelers, obviously the week before. And before the headset cut off in Josh's helmet, Brady came down and said, "Josh, we got exactly the look." And before Brady could finish the sentence, Josh says, "We're like, I know, we got it." So
Nice.
that kind of communication, no matter what, and that requires a lot of confidence in and regard for each other, the coach and the quarterback. So I think even more than the schemes, when you have that kind of relationship and a quarterback who's that excited about it, I think that it magnifies no matter what you're calling, it's just going to help the overall thing because, you can put all the X's and O's on the field, but at a certain point, if the quarterback doesn't completely believe in them, you're only going to get so far. So I think, it can go both ways. You can get an OC with a quarterback later in his everything, and we've seen this also where the quarterback knows enough to know this isn't right for me, and that can be a real problem. So I think in Josh's case, he has a guy who he knows is trying to advance him in his productivity, in his efficiency. He leads, all these categories since he came into the league. He also leads the league in interceptions since 2018. So there is a YOLO aspect to Josh's play. And I think Brady is good at not only he'll encourage that on one hand, because I also asked Josh, how do you balance structure and improvisation? And you don't want to take that away from a guy when he's, Josh Allen. But I think Josh has completely bought into what Brady wants to do, and more so than, oh, they're running a bunch of 13 personnel, or oh, they're running, more trap or wham run plays. That belief that the quarterback has in the system is everything. And that year 1, year 20, it doesn't matter. You have to have that.
Something else that really stood out to me in this article, which you can find on touchdownwire.usa.com. It was just a great overview of your 10-minute Zoom that you referenced with Josh Allen, which is awesome. Was Josh Allen said something that on the surface seems to make a lot of sense, that he said, situationally understanding how to play quarterback is very important. And he said, if it's a 3rd and short situation and that underneath target is covered, he's probably going to lean on his legs, which being Josh Allen certainly makes sense. If it's 3rd and long, say, he likes to kind of tend to throw the ball deep. Do you think, because it's kind of been a gripe of mine for as good as the Bills' offense has been the last 4 or 5 years, the yards after the catch have not really been there. They have been near the bottom of the league and at best like an average yards after the catch team, when the 49ers, the Bengals, the Chiefs certainly have been so good after the catch. Do you think that this current Bills team, tight ends, running backs, wide receivers, these skill positions around him are better positioned for Josh Allen to maybe trust hitting that check down on a 3rd and 8 and saying, hey, let Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, create after the catch? Or do you think that's maybe taking away of part of what is the best of Josh Allen, that is really just foot on the gas pedal in those kind of high leverage situations?
Well, I think it goes back to the point of the layered and nuanced route concepts, which I think with Dorsey, and this is not to bash Dorsey, but there were more ISO routes. There was more like let Josh be Josh, let Josh kind of pull it out of the fire and do his amazing stuff. I know coaches have had issues with Aaron Rodgers, who can improvise, and maybe at his prime, Rodgers may have been the best pure passer I've ever seen. But you have to balance the two things. And for Josh to say things like, with scramble drills, we've done a lot of breakdowns on it for our offense. I think there's been a lot of offseason work, and I think Brady did a lot of offseason work to say, okay, it's not just we have this athletic freak who's 6'5", 250, is bigger than the linebacker who's trying to tackle him, and he can do everything. It's, well, let's really take a look at what I remember talking to Bruce Arians years ago, and when he had Carson Palmer and Drew Stanton in Arizona, he said, I'll give the quarterback my 15, but I want his 15 because if he doesn't like what I'm calling, I'm not going to call it. So I think there's more of a togetherness. There's more of an alignment between coach and quarterback. So yes, I think there will be that, but just in an overall sense, it's really going to be more about what does Josh do best? What does Josh believe in? What are his 15? And we'll go from there.
USA Today NFL writer Doug Farrar joining us on One Bills Live right now. Doug, I want to ask you a bit about what you just said with Bruce Arians saying, hey, I want to be able to call the plays that the quarterback wants me to call. We've heard a lot.
Seems simple, right?
Right, exactly. But it's not always true within the NFL, and I think it's not always true still today. You hear more and more about, this coach wants to be for the players, wants to call things that the players like. And we've heard a lot of that already from offensive players about Joe Brady. Josh Allen has said that. Joe Brady himself has said, this is Josh Allen's offense. I want to call plays that are going to fit what players I have in it. I want them to eat. We're all going to eat. It's going to be an offense that maybe there's not a number one guy, but we're going to rely on every single person who's going to line up against the defense. When you hear an offensive coordinator say that, I know some offensive coordinators can say that and it's a half truth, but how much do you believe that that is true within what Buffalo's trying to create in 2024?
I think it's true, Maddie, and I think it resonates because Josh is the one saying it's Joe Brady's offense, and I'm here to make it better. So when the OC said it's the quarterback's offense, and the quarterback says it's the OC's offense, that's when you're like, okay, they're on the same page. So I don't, like you said, you hear that a lot, and sometimes you go then watch the tape and you go, I don't think it's anybody's offense. I don't know what they're doing here. And there were elements of that last year, especially for the Bills in the first half of the season, which is one of the reasons I think they probably made the change. I think in this case, everyone believes in it. Another thing Josh said about Brady is you can tell how much he loves the game and how hard he works because he's always in the building. And those, we talk about the X's and O's and the schemes and the metrics and all that, and that's all cool. But when you establish a buy-in, a culture of belief, that's to me more important than anything because it amplifies everything you're trying to do. So yes, I think in this case it does. I think it will play out as everyone has said, as opposed to, we're going to say all this stuff, then we're going to run this on the field, and it doesn't matter.
I have a short and sweet one about 12 personnel, Joe Brady. We know that last year in the ramp up to the 2023 season, Ken Dorsey just talked about 12 personnel over and over and over again. And like you mentioned, they were never really able to establish that. I mean, Josh Allen was very good in 12 personnel. You referenced it in your article, but with Dawson Knox getting hurt, they couldn't do that. Do you think this season, being Joe Brady's offense, do you think that he has that same type of buy-in to 12 personnel? Or, from his days in New Orleans with the Saints and certainly at LSU with Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, more wide receiver centric, do you think he'll maybe lean toward, there's so many wide receivers in this Bills room. Maddie's talking about, there's not going to maybe be a number one, but there's maybe going to be a bunch of number twos. How do you see the Bills maybe personnel wise? Are they going to lean toward 12 personnel or maybe 11 where there's more wide receivers on the field?
Well, the 2022 season, no team ran fewer snaps with two or more tight ends than the Bills. It was hilarious, like 40 snaps the whole season. I think the second least team was over 100. So then they took Kincaid with the 25th overall pick. They signed Knox to that big extension. And with Dorsey, it was a lot of 12, and Josh played well in it. The play that Josh referenced to me, the touchdown to Kincaid against the Steelers, that was in 12 personnel. He had, I believe, a 51-yarder against the Patriots, which was in 12, and both Knox and Kincaid were in the bunch left. And Kincaid ran the deep crosser over the middle, and Knox ran the little, just a release route to the flat. And the Patriots were in cover 0, and just that little thing with Trent Sherfield running kind of a 15-yard up over the numbers, it took their man concept and just blew it apart. So again, that is 12 personnel. It is layered and nuanced route concepts, and it's with both Kincaid and Knox on the field. And I think especially with so many new receivers, I mean, again, Khalil Shakir is the only guy who knows Josh Allen from before. So they've got to get all those guys together. early in the season, you could see a lot of 12 personnel because those are the only guys Josh knows
good point.
as targets. So you could certainly see a lot more of that early in the season. I mean, you draft one tight end in the first round, you give your other tight end a deal over $50 million. That is certainly your intent. And Brandon Beane has talked about how, especially against nickel defenses, which is, as you guys know, the new base in the NFL, how much you could really mess with a nickel or a big nickel or a dime defense with two tight end sets. I mean, the Chiefs, and nobody thinks about this, but the Chiefs have led the NFL in 13 personnel in each of the last two seasons. We think, oh, air raid, they're spreading it out. No, not really. They want their tight ends on the field. So I think, especially early in the season, as everyone's getting on the same page, a lot of new receivers, I think you can see a lot more 12 as long as everyone's healthy.
The Bills' offenses over the last several seasons, the last 3-4 years, have looked different under Sean McDermott. We've seen an iteration of this offense where it was smaller wide receivers who were faster, and based on the draft and some of these pickups and free agency, we've seen this offense get a little bit taller and stronger in the receivers they're putting on the field right now. A lot of people are counting out the Bills just because so many faces that were familiar faces left this building in the offseason. You bring in a lot of new players on offense and defense, but sticking to the offense, why should opponents not overlook this team? Why could this offense be just as good, if not maybe better, in 2024 when a lot of these teams don't have tape on what this group is going to look like?
Right. It's a good question. I think, well, Keon Coleman, you have that absolute ball winner at the point of attack, and he can, big guy, run fast. I mean, those are good attributes to have. And and Josh told me they're force feeding him the whole playbook. They want him to be the ex-ISO. There's no question about that. They've made that clear. I think, again, one thing that I know Brady said during this week's team participation is that he wants to make sure that he's calling the right things for all the receivers. So he is drilling down and making sure that he understands the attributes. What's best for Curtis Samuel? How can I best utilize Chase Claypool? And then the next level, and I think Brady is really good at this, is how can I utilize a formation in which it's, Knox and Samuel and Claypool, maybe in, bunch left or trips left. What are their best routes? How can I mess with this the most against cover 3? What's my quarters beater? Because teams are playing so much more quarters. So it's not only getting the best routes together for each receiver, and this includes the backs as well, because the Bills under Brady went to a ton much more 4 strong. Receivers either motioned or routes go 4 receivers to one side of the field, and they were really successful with that. So it's not just the best stuff for every receiver. I think you're going to see a lot more route concepts that are advantageous not only to the receivers, but giving Josh favorable reads, and then the time and just using his acuity to know where to go with the football. I don't think that was there as much in the first half of the season. It was a little better in the second half, and I think you're going to see it more in 2024. So if the offense is better, I think as everyone gets on the same page, and again, it's rare to see one position group go, this much change in one offseason, so it might take a minute. But I think over time, you could see a situation where maybe the Bills' offense looks a little creaky at first just because everyone's new, and then it could come together.
I have a quick follow-up to that. You spoke about Joe Brady putting in concepts that work for every wide receiver, running back, tight end that's a part of this group. Do you believe that's a tougher job as an offensive coordinator to really look at what you have and create an offense based on what you have rather than thinking, oh, here's the offenses I've ran in the past, here's the teams I've been a part of in the past, we're just going to implement a bunch of these things and put it on the field and try and see if it works? Which one is tougher to do?
Oh, interesting. Well, I think you're always looking to, Brady's he's not going to change his whole offense because they can't, let's say they wanted Malik Neighbors and they couldn't get him. So they got Keon Coleman. Oh, I have to change my whole offense because I didn't get Malik Neighbors. I don't know if that's true. I'm not, throwing hypotheses out there.
Right.
Every offensive coordinator has systems that he would prefer, and he's trying to align the players that he can get either in the draft or free agency or the ones he already has if he's coming in new. But I also think that in today's NFL, you have to be multiple on offense because defenses are so much more multiple. We've all seen this, and it's certainly with the Bills, with Poyer and Hyde and their experience, and Trey White when they were all together. A lot of coverage switches, a lot of different fronts, a lot of overloads and blitzes and stunts. You have to be more multiple on offense because defenses are counteracting that multiplicity with their own multiplicity. So if you're not on the same page with everything, it's going to be a tough go. And that's true no matter who you are or who you have on the field.
Last one for me, for as fun as it is to talk about offense, and Doug, you've done a great job kind of giving us an overview of what this Bills offense might look like that has so many new pieces. Switching sides to the defensive side of the ball. Yesterday we talked about who is the most, and we kind of posed a question out there on Twitter, gave our own thoughts on the most underappreciated or most underrated player on the Bills. You recently wrote about that and picked Rasul Douglas. Can you just kind of talk about what you've seen on film, the 4 interceptions last year, and just his fit in this more zone-heavy based defense here in Buffalo?
Yeah, it was hard not to talk about one of the linebackers, but and I've been a Rasul Douglas fan for a long time. In Green Bay last season before the trade, he allowed 23 catches on 34 targets for 274 yards, 102 yards after the catch, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and an opponent pass rating of 109.2. With the Bills, 23 catches on 41 targets for 264 yards, 77 yards after the catch, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions, and an opponent pass rating of 44.2.
Wow.
Which I believe was 4th best for any cornerback taking at least 50% of his team snaps. So with Douglas, it was okay. I found the right home. These guys were using me the way I should be used. I think we all saw with Green Bay's defense last year, and it's why they made their own change. That really wasn't the case. So, I've always liked Douglas he's a do-it-all. He can play zone, he can play man, he can play off. He's a decent presser, probably a better off guy, but I think he really, and we've all seen the transitions in the secondary in the offseason. He really helped, I think, probably not more than you guys realize because you're talking about the Bills all the time, but more than most people nationally might have realized how much he helped that defense, especially in the push down the stretch. I just think he's every player is a system player. There are very few who are scheme transcendent. But when Rasul Douglas got to Buffalo, boy, you could just see it right away that this guy was aligned really well to what Sean McDermott and his staff wants to do on that side of the ball.
And the Bills needed Rasul Douglas so much at that point when they traded for him. It was hey, you got to come in here and you got to work, and he did exactly that. And we're excited to see what he can do this season as well. Doug, thank you so much for joining us on One Bills Live. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Doug.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.